In this segment of Rec Streams, I'll be speaking with my good friend, my mentor, Dr. Cynthia McKinney, primarily on my choice in 2024 presidential candidate, Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. Before this, I would like to speak to why I've chosen Dr. Shiva. In RFK Jr., I once saw a candidate for medical freedom, but then I needed to denounce RFK Jr.'s blatant advocacy for Zionist expansionism and to denounce his candidacy altogether. In Cornel West, I saw a candidate that spoke a good game on freeing Palestine, but then I discovered a clip of West praising Dr. Fauci to his face during the peak of COVID 1984, going so far as to call Fauci, or Fausti, as Cynthia would call him, a superhero, calling Dr. Fauci a superhero to his face. So, of course, West fell short of my criteria as well. In this polarizing time, when Ziocons have the audacity to call Iran's retaliation against Israel unprovoked, Gentiles of all creeds require a champion, particularly in the States. For so long, I was without a horse to back, until recently with my discovery of Shiva's candidacy. He met my litmus test, both anti-COVID 1984 and anti-Zionist. I now turn to Dr. McKinney for her insights on the candidacy of Dr. Shiva. Dr. McKinney, given the strong, courageous stances of Dr. Shiva on issues like medical freedom and foreign policy, how do you see his candidacy influencing the current political landscape?
Well, first of all, I wish that Dr. Shiva's candidacy were more broadly, how can I say, popular or at least known about. And if we look at RFK Jr., who also fails my litmus test too, but if we look at his candidacy, I think there's a huge lesson in it that now he is turning to the Libertarian Party. And the reason he's turning to the Libertarian Party is the issue of ballot access. So with ballot access being the issue, then how do we create a groundswell when we can't even get our candidate on the ballot? And so of course, it's impossible to look at the political scene in the United States today and not be aware of Dr. Shiva, because I think there are many aspects of his candidacy at that time for the United States Senate, I believe, that were groundbreaking. And the things that were done to him to make sure that there was no place at all whatsoever in the politics of the U.S. for Dr. Shiva, that told me, well, that's where I need to be. That's where I need to focus, because we don't see that kind of animus really against RFK Jr. But then Dr. Shiva has actually made a difference in our awareness of how corrupt our system is, not just because of what happened in his candidacy, but also what they personally did to him. How far did big tech go? How far did the Democratic Party go? How far did the political establishment go to keep Dr. Shiva out of the political mainstream? And has that stopped? Quite frankly, no, it hasn't. So in my mind, just because if they tell me it's blue, then I'm going to make sure that there's not a hint of blue anywhere. I'm not going to see the blue. I'm going to see everything but the blue, and then I'll come and see the blue. So with everyone pointing me in this direction, or pointing all of us voters in that matter, for that matter, in this direction, that direction, the other direction, anywhere except Dr. Shiva, then I want to look at more about Dr. Shiva. And I have to tell you, I have to learn a lot more about Dr. Shiva. But what I can say is he has done the people of the United States a huge favor in exposing the level of corruption in big tech. That's number one.
Yeah, presently, with the information you have at your disposal, is he endorsement material?
Oh, he's absolutely endorsement material. What we have to figure out is how can we define this process so that we can be victor material. And so that's what I, would like to sort of contemplate, think about.
I have a story to tell you, because you bring
Okay.
that up. You bring that up, and like, I'm about to start, circulating petitions for him. But he, you've had, petition circulators for him already. They've been arrested outside of grocery stores, and yet that is their constitutional right. They are entirely legally protected to do that. And yet, you have the mechanisms, ignoring the law and arresting petition circulators, doing what petition circulators do. I've seen a great many RFK Jr. petition circulators outside of the grocery stores that I go to, and there are no arrests made then. So that's my 2 cents on your present commentary on that.
Mm-hmm. And so, I'm sure that the people around Dr. Shiva and Dr. Shiva himself have looked at the ballot access requirements. And, here's the other thing. I just came back from Russia and I was observing their elections. And in Russia, there's one set of election rules. Here we've got 50. So we got to navigate 50 different sets of rules, 50 different deadlines, 50 different ways in which to keep candidates off of ballots. And so then what are the ballots? What are the states where ballot access is a little easier? And even though the laws have changed, say like my home state of Georgia, it's still darn near impossible for say the non-libertarian party candidate to get on the ballot, for an independent candidate to get on the ballot in Georgia. Well, Georgia is one of the swing states. So now there's so much that has to be figured out. And then, of course, there's the manipulation of changing the deadlines. So primaries are being moved up, the election dates, the primary dates are being moved up. Why? So that they can prevent people from having access to the ballot. And this all is, just sort of goes into the uniparty that we're saddled with, and the requirement that we have for a revolution. We need a revolution of thoughts, and we need a revolution of policies as well. But we'll only get that when we have the revolution of behaviors.
So from your perspective, how significant is it for a presidential candidate to openly challenge mainstream narratives around COVID-19 and foreign policy stances, as Dr. Shiva has? Like the significance of it. I've already explained.
I think it's extremely significant. And in fact, I'll be honest with you that he just did I think it's an open house, he calls them. I'm not sure exactly what he calls them, but he just did like a lecture on GMOs. I think every person in the United States needs to see that, but not just in the United States. You know why? Because big pharma and big corporations, big ag, are pushing GMOs all over the planet. And so you've got people who are being forced that, even in India. What was India going through a few years ago? It was the suicides of the farmers. Why? Because they were being forced to take those Monsanto seeds that don't reproduce seeds. And then every year they have to buy the seeds. So, and Dr. Shiva did a whole, I think it was like 45 minutes on how you can beat big ag, big pharma at their own game, and even the peer-reviewed articles that are allowed into journals. And he did that. So for me, that's really, really important, because perhaps there is a way for other kinds of thinking to make it into peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Shiva showed us you can do it, and then they can't argue with that, because basically the corruption of the climate change IPCC, I think, the scientific community, in those initial page articles, they all referenced each other, and I didn't believe it. So I pulled the articles myself, and I looked at the references myself, and I saw that they were all referencing each other. And so, yeah, now you're going to base a whole global science and global industry on documents that have been scientifically demonstrated to be fraudulent. And I mean, well, they did it again with COVID, didn't they? They did it again with COVID. So they will do it over and over and over again. How are we to know what's real science versus fake science if we're not allowed to see the actual science? And for that, we have to be able to do the free thinking ourselves, and we have to be able to do the research ourselves. And that's the value of having someone with Dr. Shiva's background in office, because he can roll up his sleeves and he can do the research himself. And that's research that we can count on.
So you said yes. So yes, endorsement material, but with regards to Victor material, as you laid out, you have the obstacle of ballot access. There's also another thing, election integrity. Now you see, I was probably the second time I became aware of Dr. Shiva. The first time was when my friend, a former senator out there in Trinidad and Tobago, Kirk Ming Hu, had him on. And this was way before this. But the second time that I really got notice of Dr. Shiva was when he did the Arizona 2020 election audit, when he was appointed by the Arizona Senate to oversee that. And there's just so much that just killed my faith in electoralism. I don't like to think of myself as an anti-electoralist, but then you see, I absolutely empathize with those who see this electoral system as irredeemable. What are your
I would agree with you on that. I agree with you, because there's so many flaws in the system. So the value of I have my template for global social control. I use it in my class, and this is the first semester that I've actually used that template. I have another template that I use, which is a template, I call them my template for the international system. And so basically, my template for the international system reflects what I discovered through my own personal experiences of traveling all over the world and seeing who even gets to travel all over the world, right? It's really an apartheid world. It's a world of apartheid. And then when you look a little bit more deeply, what you see is that you've got the world basically divided in those who did the colonizing and those who were colonized. And so then, learning from Frantz Fanon, We understand that there's a psychology with of the colonizers, and there's a psychology of those who were colonized. And we have to get through all of that. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that there's a construct, a political construct that has been created, and who created it and why did they create it? They created it for themselves, but they lead us to believe that this creation is for us. It's not for us, and it was never for us. Okay, so now in my template for global social control, I've got I got an oval table. I've got 3 people on this side, 3 people on the short side. I've got 10 people on the long side and 10 people on the other long side. So I've got a table of 26 people, and I ask my students, okay, let's look at several different issues. Let's look at COVID, because everybody was affected by COVID. Who would be the 26 people around the table? We know Tedros was the face, but he wasn't the brains of that operation. So now who else deserves to go around that table? And then after we do 1 or 2 more topics, issues, then I ask my students to think in terms of who has a permanent seat at the table. And let's think about naming, facing, titling them. And so that's where I am in this whole sort of trying to figure out the world, and trying to figure out my place in the world, and trying to figure out how my students can become the leaders that the world needs, that Bangladesh needs, that we need, that our generation needs. And so now we're trying to figure out who the permanent seats, like the permanent seats at the United Nations, who are the permanent seats around this table of global social control. And I think that if we had people who were not viable, they will not sacrifice their sacred values in order to get a seat at the table. Those are the people that we need to have in leadership positions. And how do we even know who they are? I think Dr. Shiva is one of those persons. But now you tell me, what is it that I can do in order to sort of, I'm on the other side of the planet, but what can I do to promote Dr. Shiva and to promote his candidacy? One of the things that I think is really important for us is to, how can I say this? Expose people to the lies in which they think are the truth. They think that's the reality, but, they exist in a world of manufactured realities, manufactured truths, manufactured consents, manufactured political candidacies, like Rishi Sunak, all manufactured. So how can we know who's real and who's not real? That's another thing I'm trying to help my students to navigate.
Well,
because it's a question that I have to navigate for myself. How do I know? And then how can I make a difference there when I'm all the way over here?
Well,
and why?
I'm sorry.
And why am I here and not there? These are things that I'm personally dealing with at the moment.
That question you bring up, that question, and it just, I'm sorry, I interrupted way too many times. It's just, but that question, it really hit. But I think it's a blessing and a curse that we live in the age of the internet, because whereas it is substantially difficult to find out who's real, it's easy to also find people who are real. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't mean to disrupt your thought.
That's right.
That
That's
question
right.
just hit so hard, you know?
That's right. That's right. And here's the thing. This is why I also contemplate the question about the culpability or the responsibility. Under Iris Marion Young, I understand that I have to distinguish between guilt and responsibility, but where does my responsibility as a taxpayer in the United States, as a voter in the United States, where does my responsibility end for the actions of the United States? Does my responsibility ever end for the actions of the United States? Can I say, oh, that was them. Oh, that's the government. Oh, that wasn't me. When everything the United States does today is to perpetuate the ills from the past. So at some point, we've got to say, okay, people, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot enjoy the benefits and then say, I have no responsibility for the pain that it causes on the other side of the planet. Can't have it both ways. And so I don't know, to be honest, William, I don't know if the people of the United States are ready for tough love, the tough love that they need. Because right now they're not getting any kind of love, right?
I think, while you have a point there, we're at the precipice of a civil war, a national divorce of some sort. And whether it's, a civil war or a civil national divorce, not a war, or, I don't know how we can ever put the word civil behind war, but there we go.
Yeah.
War is the very exact opposite of civilization. It's the antithesis. But I think we have this moment where a former president is on his the first criminal trial of an ex-president. That's happening right now, and I think this might present an opportunity. And we have 2 minutes left on the session, by the way. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
restart, we can restart. But we're at a precipice with that. And I'm thinking out of the chaos can bear a new system. Dr. Shiva is a system scientist, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to break up the corporation of the United States into several kingdoms, republics, and democracies, because this is this is not working. You have half of the country and another half, and then you have fringes trying to force their values onto each other every single 4 years. To what end? It just all gets reversed on whichever, opposite side of the uniparty wins. And I just feel in a system that where you really localize, you just slice the states into pieces like a piece and like a pizza for a elementary school classroom, and you're on a teacher's pay. You just something's got to give, and I don't think that just like the empires of the past, that this can maintain itself for too much longer. Not at all.
What I want to say is this is exactly, I just spent the last week grading exam papers for my students.
Hmm.
One of the questions that I asked one of the sections of my class, now we're using this, my template for global social control. This is one of the things that I've asked them to look at. And I've asked them to look at who sits at the table. And in this particular exam, the reading that I gave the students to read and then respond to was from, I think, the Heritage Foundation. There's some foundation that is predicting the breakup of the United States. And they've got, I believe, 5 different states that the United States could become. There are some that say it will break up into even more than 5. I think it's heritage, but I'm not sure. I can't remember now. And so the question that I asked my students to contemplate, I mean, there were several questions that I asked them, but the one that I think is particularly pertinent here is, do you think the world would be better off if those sitting around the table of global social control are successful in destroying the United States of America? That's what I want my students to contemplate, because, I mean, I have that question myself. So there was a time in the history of the United States where there were people sitting around a table, right? And they were deciding, well, the United States is going to become too strong, and so therefore we want to break them up now, right? And it was Abraham Lincoln who could have gone along with it, but said, no, I'm not going to go along with breaking up the United States. Who were those people sitting around the table then? And I'm wondering who the people are now sitting around the table whose objective is the same as the people who were sitting around the table then. Is there anything in common with those? Oh my gosh, now you got my extremely imperfect. Extremely imperfect, but okay. So now I'm wondering if I can go ahead.
Oh, it's a screenshot. I can just
Oh, it's a screenshot. Oh, okay.
Screenshot things that you draw, and then I can show it for future reference. That's how we can do it. Screenshot.
Okay.
Tell me an image is
okay.
there.
Yeah. Until I master this tablet thing, which of course you can see I haven't mastered it at all. This is only the second time I've tried to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's look at 1860s United States and 2024 United States. Is there a relationship with these people sitting around the table who were trying to destroy the United States then and who might be trying to destroy the United States as we know it now? I think there might be. I don't know the answer to the question, but I think there might be. And just as they were thwarted in one aspect, because they were thwarted in one way, and then they came back and said, okay, well, if we can't break you up, we'll just own you. And then that's how we got the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.
Oh, yes, that's definitely an aspect for sure. Oh, wow.
So I'm wondering, are we and the rest of the world better off if those people win? Or are we and the rest of the world worse off if those people win?
Well, I think it depends on how much of the pizza they get. Now,
right now they have it all.
I know. And they intend to keep it that way.
And they intend to keep it that way. So if they can have the whole pizza by making 8 slices. 8 slices will give them the whole pizza. And so is it easier for us to maintain a slice, or is it easier for us to maintain the whole? I don't know the answer to the question, but this is what I'm thinking. And I'm asking my students to think, is it ever advantageous for us to concede to the people sitting around the table?
I think you take a slice at a time. You deal with the cards that you're dealt, and you do your damnedest.
But see, what they've done is they divided the United States into 50 pieces, right? So let's just look at how the Israeli lobby came from nowhere to everywhere. And in Georgia now, they had this requirement for you to sign a loyalty oath in Georgia, and then Martin, the journalist, Abby, no, what was her name? What's her name?
Or wait, I mean, are you talking about Abby Martin?
The journalist, right?
Yeah.
Who filed the lawsuit against the state because she was offered an opportunity to come speak, and they said no, you can't come and speak until you can't get paid. You can come and speak, but you won't get paid until you sign this loyalty oath to Israel. This is state of Georgia now. Abby Martin, that's right. And she said, no, I'm not going to sign that. That what they did not want was for her to set what they wanted, those people sitting around the table who have now divided the United States into 50 slices, and they are eating every slice. It's like,
when I
so it's like, I don't know. I'm thinking with you out loud. I really, really don't have an answer, but I know that my knee-jerk response is that I never want to be in alignment with those people at the table.
Oh yeah, for sure. When I refer to these slices, like these 50 slices, they're not, I mean, they're hardly even slices. They're held together by that cheese crust filling called the federal government. And you see, that's kind of what I'm speaking about when I say that, I want to remove the federal government from the equation, is what I mean by making, by localizing every governance, and having the people actually govern themselves instead of this federal system.
I know, but you know what? That still doesn't get us out of the fact that 26 people sitting around this table of global social control all 50 slices of pizza.
What's your prediction then? What's your prediction? Just your educated guess on what would happen if Republican dominant areas and Democrat dominant areas, because those are the, unfortunately, the chief card players at the moment, Republican dominant areas and Democrat dominant areas forming their own federal governments, like what happened way back when, but in a modern context. What would you foresee as issues in that equation?
If we don't get rid of the 26 people around the table, it really doesn't matter. We need to eliminate the table. And we need to eliminate the 26 people around that table. And this, of course, is where I come to the idea of direct democracy. Because it's a whole lot easier to control 535 plus whatever the number is for each state than it is to control 300 million. So it's what I'm grappling with now, and so what do we really mean when we say whatever it is, what do we mean? We're going to take our country back. That's what people are saying now. We're going to take our country back. Well, how are you going to get it back from the 26 people sitting around the table? How are you going to get it? And if no one is in some room somewhere unpublicized discussing that issue, and I can guarantee you that the people sitting around the table, the 26 people sitting around the table, they are in a back room, and they are contemplating ways in which we might come up with strategies to overthrow them, and then they will preempt our strategy because they've gamed it and they've thought it out. So we got to do that, and we got to figure out a new way of fighting, and we got to, there's so many things, but you have been able to traverse the generations, and that is really remarkable. You, I think, are a remarkable young man. And so you have been able to traverse generations, racial divides, sexual divides. I mean, every kind of way they can think to divide, political spectrum divides. I mean, they got so many different ways to divide us, right? Because that has become a science unto itself as well. But if we don't figure this one out, then they are going to win. And you're right to refer to Dr. Shiva as a systems man, because what we're discussing is a system that has been put in place, and that has almost become self-perpetuating, like the injections that they want to give people will be self-replicating. So, it's like a self-perpetuating system of complete oppression. And it's not that we can't fight it, because in the past, individuals like me and you were able to fight and win and beat them back. But they've always had a response to that. So now how can we not allow first we have to create the movement. I think Dr. Shiva is doing a good job of that. Then we have to make sure that our movement does not become co-opted. And that means that every one of us has to become a guardian of our movement. So anyway, that's the only, I haven't gotten very much further than that. That's as far as I've gotten.
You've brought, in all that, you've brought up a lot of things that I most certainly need to meditate on.
Yeah, we all need to do some meditation, it's true. We need to think.
And so I've got to ask, so you have Iran schooling Israel on the imperative of not murdering civilians, and you'll have a bunch of Ziocons touting that, oh, what an ineffective strike, even though they took out the F-35s that did the attack on the consulate in the first place. I mean, it was a reciprocal strike, in my view. It's kind of a rhetorical question in a way, but will Israel take some notes or continue on this genocidal belligerence? Because Iran has proven you can strike military targets and not harm civilians at the same time. That's my interpretation of events. And it's people want to say that Iran is genocidal towards Jews when it's the second most Jewish populous nation in the Middle East. And
that's right.
Israel's only the first most populous because, well, European migration and forced migration. You had a bunch of Zionist terrorism back in the day that actually forced Jewish people in other Middle Eastern territories to make their way down to occupied Palestine. And so yeah, again, it was more of a rhetorical question. I'm sure they're going to continue this genocidal belligerence.
They are. They are.
I could not believe there was so much fear that Iran was going to incur civilian damage. I did not believe that. I did not think that was going to happen for a second. And if it did happen, I wasn't going to, I mean, all my emotions go primarily to the Gazans who have been oppressed for so long. I consider Alaska flood not necessarily, something that I would support, but it's not something I condemn either. I can see clearly you had the slave rebellions back in the day
Mm-hmm.
in the States, and there was much extreme violence, way more
Yeah.
violent than anything beheld on October 7th. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't condemn that violence. It's a reaction to oppression, and there is under no circumstances can I condemn it, as Pierce Morgan will often, ask his guests, "Oh, do you condemn Hamas?" I'll condemn Hamas for accepting Qatari funds from Israel.
Yeah, right, right, right.
And that's as far as I'll go with it.
But
It
William, here's my dilemma. As much as I am discussing the need for a revolution, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, a revolution of values.
yeah.
Um, we need this revolution. And as I teach my students, the revolutions can be violent, but they don't have to be. And so I have to be honest with you. I have to be honest with myself because I would like to think that I would like to think that I'm a little bit harder than this, but I don't like to see anybody die. I don't like to see any soldiers killed. And that's really on both sides. I just look at it as such a waste of human talent. But I know that there are other wastes of human talent that are taking place, and that people have to resist tyranny and they have to resist in the way that they best can. And I get that. I absolutely get that. But still, I'm on those channels on Telegram. And so I see those dead soldiers and you know, I stop. I'm sick and tired of seeing, young people your age and they're now martyrs. I'm sick and tired of seeing soldiers on the other side who, you know, it it seems that we ought to have reached such a higher plane of living or a higher plane of being that we could resolve our differences in ways that don't include that. And there's a song that I'm going to find it. I have to find it. I'm going to find it and I'm going to share it with you. And hopefully you'll share it with your audience. The name of the song is Who Is Your God? And the singer is an Israeli Jew. The musicians are Muslims. And they have made together a beautiful, beautiful statement about how can you do the things you do and still then pray to a God. So the question is, who is your God? It's such a beautiful song. And, I'm not religious, despite having gone to Catholic school, almost went to Notre Dame. But I mean, I'm not really religious in that sense. And I'm certainly not a scholar of religions. But I do think that there's some spirituality. We all know right and wrong, okay? And if we all know right and wrong, then we know when we're doing wrong. No matter what the political objective is, no matter how much money you want to put in the bank, no matter, by the end of the day, it's wrong. And there's this thing called Kol Nidre. So if you're Jew and you lie to somebody and you know that you are lying to them, every year, this Kol Nidre allows you to say, I lied. I knew I was lying, but it's okay because my religion says so. Now, that means that, I mean, what kind of values are those? And then, so I think, so I just have started looking at, I've started looking at a whole lot of stuff, trying to answer my questions, sort of fundamental questions about how I want to live my life. And I want to be in alignment with my values. And I want my values to actually make the world a better place while not harming me and not harming anyone else. That's kind of like my sole objective of being. Anyway, I don't know. There's not very much else to say. I don't know. There's lots I don't know.
And there's so much more out there to know. And
that's right.
And so we'll just end this segment here. So is there anything else other than, as you've mentioned, GMOs, anti-GMOs, anti-COVID-19 84, anti-Zionist? Is there anything else that you've been able to see so far from Dr. Shiva that just pops out or?
I like well, you see, I've only some of his videos you need to watch several times because I multitask. I always have some exams to grade. I always have some papers to grade. I always have some homework to grade. So a lot of time I am multitasking. But he's got a theory of the swarm, and I love it because that's my actual experience. That's what happens, and we've got to defeat the swarm. Now, if you want to look at what just happened, how did Iran defeat or the resistance? All of the is not just Iran. How did the resistance defeat Patriot, Arrow, and Iron Dome? They defeated it with the swarm. So you've got those Garon drones that cost what, $1,000 a piece? And you swarm them. And they occupy all of those missile defense systems. And then you can direct your more authoritative, more expensive arsenal into certain places where you know that you've already occupied Iron Dome, Patriot, and Arrow. So the swarm is maybe their weapon, but it can be our weapon too. So I would like to know a little bit more about the swarm because I have to admit I was multitasking when Dr. Shiva was talking about the swarm, but I find it.
He has an entire website dedicated to the topic. If you want to write it down, shatterthestorm.com. Maybe you'll it. Shatterthestorm.com.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I definitely want to do that. I'll go there and I will look at more. I hope he's got some more videos.
So, yeah, so hopefully sometime in the future we can get wires. Maybe you'll be back in the States before the election and time zones will be less hindrance.
That's right.
What we got
I would love to have, I would love to have the opportunity to defy all of the time zone issues and actually sit down with Dr. Shiva and have a significant and meaningful conversation about all of the issues that he has brought forward to this day.
Okay, so that concludes this segment. Thank you everybody for watching.
Bye-bye.